I love this girl.
We do too.
You guys are so lucky to have her. Wow. I wish she had been my mom. Well, hi everybody. I'm so glad you came. Thank you for coming. So Diane's right. I'm from Santa Barbara, but I'm actually from Salem, Oregon. So I was raised and born in a very cold climate in the wintertime too, so I do know what rain, sleet, snow, and hail looks like. But when I was about 27 years old, I moved to Santa Barbara. And in my early life, I had 5 kids in our family. I was the 4th out of 5. And when I was about 12, my parents divorced. When I was about 13, my mom became a police officer. And that was very early on in women becoming police officers. She was in her 50s at the time. And she carried a gun in her purse, and she had handcuffs in her purse, and she worked in the jail, and yeah, it was very interesting. So, as a young person, I looked at the behaviors that I saw with people that she had in the jail, and the stories that she told about what happened with different people, and I chose a life of not drinking alcohol, not doing drugs. My mom used to threaten me and say, if you do anything to embarrass our family or embarrass me in front of all of my colleagues at the Marion County Deputy Sheriff's Department, I will shoot your ass off. And I'll be like, no, I'm never doing anything wrong, as I know she'll carry through with that one. So I ended up going through school, working for Pacific Northwest Bell Telephone, AT&T, getting married. That marriage actually, I bought my first house when I was 21. That marriage didn't work out. I had a 1-year-old son, and the person I was married to had gone to high school with me, but he just had no drive in life. He literally wouldn't watch the baby. He wouldn't have a job. He just had nothing going for him. And finally, after about 3 or 4 years of being married, I said, do you really want to be married? Do you want to move back in with your parents or something? Oh. And he just went and moved back with his parents. So I sold the house and I moved on. So I was working in Portland, Oregon. I was transferred with AT&T up to Portland. I had an amazingly well-paid job for being as young as I was. And I ended up, through my work, being assigned a position where I was helping a condominium project that was being built in Depot Bay, Oregon, down at the beach about 50 miles from Portland, in getting all of their phone systems installed. And it turned out that the person who was the general contractor for that project invited me to the final party that they had when they grand opened this project. Well, he'd never met me in person, he just dealt with me on the phone. And I guess he took a liking to me, so he started traveling up to Portland. And when he decided to move to California, back where he was from in Santa Barbara, I was offered, since we had been dating, to move to California and get married, or, we were breaking off the situation. Well, the marriage in Santa Barbara looked good, and I thought this is good for my son and myself. And so we moved down to Santa Barbara and got married, and it wasn't very long afterwards that I started realizing that he had a very strong lack of control over his anger. He hadn't shown it when we were up there, and I had no contact with his family or any of his friends down in Santa Barbara prior to moving. So once I moved down there, all of my friends and family thought, oh my gosh, she escaped Oregon, and she's living in heaven, in paradise, and this must be the most amazing thing ever. And did I want to admit that it wasn't the most amazing thing ever? I didn't. So I didn't tell anybody. I was being isolated away from my family, so when I would call them, he would say that I was spending too much money with telephone bills. If I wrote to them, I was spending too much time writing. And so I was drawn away from my connections with my family. I was not encouraged and allowed to have friends in Santa Barbara. So I was really being isolated, and it was very difficult for me because the abuse was physical as well as emotional. And so here was my little son, and I ended up having another daughter with him. And when she was about 5 months old, I lifted something too heavy at his direction. He forced me to lift up something way too heavy that shouldn't have done after a pregnancy. And I ruptured a disc in my lower back. And I crumpled to the ground, and he would disgustedly walked away, pissed off with me that I wasn't doing my share of lifting this item. It turned out that this disc was ruptured, and the first doctor that saw me said that I would never walk again. I was 31 years old. So that was very, very upsetting. And so there were a couple people at a church that I attended that had kind of, quietly befriended me, and they were the ones that told me, no, you need to see this neurosurgeon in Santa Barbara, and you need to get a second opinion. So I braved it, and I went to a neurosurgeon, and he very kind of cockily held up my x-rays and the MRI scans and the CAT scans that had already been done and said, I can fix this. I wanted to believe that. So they scheduled surgery, and he got an orthopedic surgeon on the team, and they were going to do this in December of 1987. 31 years old with a 5-month-old baby by this time, and my 8-year-old son. The night that they wanted me to go into the hospital in Santa Barbara, they wanted me to check in like around 5 or 6 in the evening, and they wanted to do one final test prior to having the surgery the next morning at 7 a.m. They said they were going to do a myelogram, and that's where they inject iodine dye into your spinal cord. And in my situation, they did it right at the back of my neck. They just numbed the area and then injected the dye into my spinal cord. They had me on an x-ray table, and they had explained to me that they were going to tip the x-ray table so that my head was raised and my feet were lowered, and with gravity, that iodine dye would travel down my spinal cord. They would take x-rays to see if the chip from the blown-out disc had chipped my spinal cord, because they were concerned that the spinal fluid was flowing out of my spinal cord, and that was causing my inability to walk. So there were 2 x-ray techs in the room, and I was laid out on the table, and they injected the dye. Both the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon were in the room, and I'm assuming it was because back in 1987, maybe they wouldn't have gotten the test results before 7 a.m. the next morning, and so they were there to actually see on the monitor what they were going to be looking at in that area. And then there was a nurse in the room. So they began, the x-ray tech that was standing next to the table, there was one at the head of the table. My head was right here. If I'm laying on the table like this, my head was right here, and then the x-ray tech had a monitor that was, he was sitting on a raised chair right there, and then the other x-ray tech, they were standing there, and he started making the table move, so it started going rrrr, and the little engine was going. And they began talking about their weekend plans. Unfortunately, the button that he was pushing on the table was lowering my head. The dye was flowing from that spot in my neck into my brain. Oops. First thing that I felt was, I wonder if I'm supposed to feel like this. I kind of feel a little bit weird. But those 2 guys are talking, and the other 2 doctors are standing behind those 2 guys over here. I can't really see them. The guy's body's blocking me from them. So I'm just laying there, and they had told me that if I moved at all, that I would get headaches for months afterwards. They told me I had to hold very still. Okay, 31, I'm going to follow directions. My mom was a cop. I do the right thing. Laying there thinking, I feel really funny. Am I supposed to feel like this? I feel like I'm going to faint. I better tell them. Unfortunately, my brain now did not function along with my body. And when I wanted to speak, I couldn't open my mouth and I couldn't say anything. And then that's when panic set in. I couldn't move my arm to touch him to get his attention. I was laying there pretty much stuck. And I realized, oh my God, something really bad. I think I'm gonna faint, this might be bad. I started panicking. Panicking, thinking, oh my God. And then I started hyperventilating. My eyes were rolling to the back of my head, and I was trying really hard to get them to stay forward. And they were rolling back, and then I started going, well, that's what the two guys ended up hearing to let them know that something was wrong. So they stopped talking, and the x-ray tech that was right here, I think the nurse came up and approached the side of him, and he leaned over my face, and my eyes were rolling backwards, and I was hyperventilating, and he then, I was trying to, get him, like look at him and say something to him, but I was trapped. And he leaned backwards and he looked to see where his thumb was on the side of the table, and that was the last thing that I saw. His face, he made a face like, oh my God. And that was it. I'm gone. I closed my eyes and my body, and the next second, I was up on the ceiling, and it literally felt like, I didn't look to see if I had a body or anything, but it literally felt like I had a pressure against the back of my head. So I was looking right above my body, looking down at my body, and it felt like I'd hit a barrier, and I was just up there. And instead of being panicked, which was what I was feeling, huge panic inside my body over what was unfolding, it was absolutely the most incredible feeling of love and acceptance, and wrapped in a warm blanket, and literally I looked down and I looked at my body and I said, if I'm up here and my body's down there and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. So there was no, oh my God, I'm leaving my children, I'm panicked, none of that occurred. But my first thought was, I can't leave my children in this situation. If I leave them, there's no one there to stick up for them anymore. I can't do that. Immediately, when I said, I think I just died, I felt a presence next to me. Now, I didn't turn and look at him, or her, or it, because I felt so deeply in my soul that I had been a part of that presence since the first day all the way back to the beginning of time, and would be a part of that presence all the way in the future till the end of time. It literally felt as you would feel if you were a Christian, that God was. And if you were another religion, some other entity. And I didn't need to know up there on the ceiling who it was. I began to speak to him in my train of thought, and there's no body up there, of course. And I said, very calmly, I need to go back into my life. If I leave my children in this time, in this way, they'll never grow up to be the human beings that they're capable of being. I need to go back. Now, also, in that moment when I was initially out of my body, it came very clear to me what my purpose for my life was. I saw it absolutely clearly what I had as what I was supposed to do. There was a big purpose. I don't know whether I assigned it to myself or it was assigned to me, but this was your purpose, and you, this is you. This is who you are. And so I also said to the being, I need to go back to complete that work. So I ended up saying that. Now, they down below went into panic mode when I stopped breathing. And the nurse ran over to the phone, and she was calling for the defib unit and an oxygen card, and the oxygen card came in, and a woman, wheeled it next to the table and then put an oxygen mask on my body down below, and I was watching all of this as it was going on in complete calm. And the two doctors were staying back. The two x-ray techs were doing CPR. The nurse that came in with the oxygen cart was in the room now. And then this man brought in a small square box, and there was a ledge next to the table. And he walked around the end of the bed, and he was standing in between the x-ray table and the wall, and there was a ledge. So he put this box on this ledge, and then he had these little round white things, and he started peeling the backs of them off and putting them on my body down below. I never really was a TV person, I'm still not now. And so I did not know what he was doing. And I'd understood the oxygen mask, and I'd understood the CPR, and I could hear her calling for a defibrillator, and I knew what that was to restart my heart. Well, it was a heart monitor that he was putting on me, but I didn't know that. And so I ended up in the middle of I asked about 4 times to go back into my body in this calm way and to do my life purpose. In the midst of asking those different times and talking about, why I needed to go back and everything to this being, I said, what is that he's doing? And when I said that, I went from the ceiling down right in front of the heart monitor box that was on the ledge, and I saw the man reach over and do a little silver toggle switch, and he flipped it from down to up. And this green light lit up in this little bar that was through the center of the little box, and it started going across the line, and it was going straight across the line. I didn't know what it was. I watched it. I was right in front of it like this. And so I watched it go across the line, went across the second time, started again and went across. And then the third time started to go across. All of a sudden, about a third of the way over, I went, oh, I think that's supposed to be going up and down. My heart has stopped. So I actually watched my own flat line, listened to the monitor of the box going beep. So then, once I got it, interestingly, I was back up on the ceiling again with the beam next to me. So it was kind of like when I asked, what is that he's doing? I was transferred down there to see it, what it was, figure it out, and then when I got it, I was back up with the beam again on the ceiling. So I continued to say how much I wanted to go back. And then the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon who had been standing back, the neurosurgeon said, too much time is passing, she's going to have brain damage. We need to do something. So the orthopedic surgeon said, stand clear, and the 2 x-ray techs stepped back from the front of the table, and he took 2 steps forward, took his fist from behind his back, and went whammo on my chest. Now I watched that from up above, and when you're hit that hard, your body kind of, reacts to that. Your muscles are still there, and your body kind of jerks. I watched that, and the being finally spoke to me. I've been saying in this calm way all the time how much I wanted to go back and why I need to go back, and because of my husband's abuse, and talking all the details, and the being said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then I was shown all these little film clips of all these damaging instances in our marriage where he had hit me, knocked me to the ground, kicked me, berated me, laughed at me when I cried. All the things that I had been trying to forgive him for were all flashed in little instances in front of my understanding, so I would know what I was going back into if I truly wanted to go back. And then I was given the opportunity to evaluate what I had done. I guess I did that automatically. I evaluated what I had done to change my husband. Because all these years that I had been married to him, it was about 7 years by that time, I had thought, if I'm only loving enough, if I only forgive enough, if I only do everything the way that he wants it done, if I only make sure that children don't question things, if I do all these things, maybe I can get him to stop being angry. So I looked at all the things I'd done, from being angry myself and leaving him for 6 months when he actually lured me back again, saying he would never do it again. He always said he would never do it again. So I was kind of evaluating all the things I'd done, and all marriage family therapy he abandoned, pastor of a church, a few visits he abandoned. I'd kind of run out of options. And as I evaluated all that up on the ceiling, I realized it wasn't him that needed to change. I couldn't change him. It was me. I needed to stop accepting it. So I then said to the being, if you let me go back, I promise you I will get strong enough to leave him. In that second, the doctor did the second precardial thump, and my eyes simply shut from up above, and I opened my eyes, and the doctor's fist was just being removed. He was just lifting his fist from my body. So he was only an arm's length away from my face. And I spoke into the oxygen mask, and I said, what just happened? I had complete recall that I had just left my body, been on the ceiling, had the being there. It was all fresh and clean and beautiful, and that I was now back again, that I'd gotten my wish. And the nurse standing next to the doctor said, stop, don't talk, we need to stabilize you. So for 20 minutes, they had that oxygen mask on my face, and I was looking at everybody, and I don't know what they were doing to stabilize me, but my heart was beating fine. I was perfectly healthy other than that ruptured disc in my back. So then they took the oxygen mask off my face. And that's when I said, what happened? I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon said, oh, brother. But that was the best thing he could have done, because at 31, never having ever heard of a near-death experience, never having meditated, no yoga. I was a mom. I was going to, soccer things after school with my children. I was working full-time, and I was doing the things to keep this husband happy. I didn't have time to just read, or there was no internet at that time. There was nothing that I could have access that could have told me what this was. And so I then said, when he said, oh brother, I said, no, I was up on the ceiling. I could see everything. She was on the phone the whole time calling for the defib unit, and she called in the oxygen card, and that lady came in and brought the oxygen card in, and she put the mask on my face. And then you two were doing CPR until the oxygen card came, but then you were just doing chest compressions, and then you brought in the heart monitor, and I watched it flatlining. And then you said to him that too much time was passing, so he stepped 2 steps forward, struck my chest twice, and then I'm back. Well, all the time that I was saying that, the orthopedic surgeon was standing there like everybody else in complete astonishment, but the neurosurgeon clenched his fist. He was right next to the table. He moved right next to the table next to the orthopedic surgeon, and he clenched his fist, and he gritted his teeth, and he pulled his arms up like this, and he said, I am not going to stand here and listen to this. And he stormed out of the room. Woo! So everybody else stayed, and the orthopedic surgeon was really nice and held my hand and said, what else did you see, and what did you feel? And, kind of everybody was like, So then they put me on a gurney, and they put me up in my room. And when I would ask about anything, they did surgery the next day. They fixed the blown disc. There was no damage to the spinal cord. It got a laminectomy, discectomy, fixed the problem for about, 10, 12 years, and then I had spinal fusion surgery, and that fixed it better. So they did the surgery, but everybody who walked into my room, when I would ask, what happened during that myelogram last night? They would say, I don't see anything on your chart, what are you talking about? And when I asked the doctor the next day after the surgery, they both came into the recovery area, and both doctors were together, and they started walking toward me. I said, what happened? And they said, if you want to talk about what happened during your myelogram, this is the neurosurgeon, you know, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about your surgery and how it went. And so he completely diverted off the subject. So 2 weeks later, after I got out of the hospital, by the way, my ex-husband now came in after the surgery that afternoon. And when I told him what happened with the myelogram, he looked at me and said, that's absurd. That couldn't have happened. You hallucinated it. So, the last time that I talked about it for about 13 years was when I went back to the neurosurgeon for a follow-up visit about 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital. And I was sitting alone in the exam room. My husband never went with me to help in any way. And the doctor came in, and he literally walked over to me, and he put his hand right in front of my face like this, and he said, if you want to talk about what happened during your myelogram, then you can get out of my office and find yourself another neurosurgeon. So, I didn't have the guts, the balls to just like attack these people. I didn't sue anybody. I just closed it completely down. I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. So, number of years go by, about 13 I would say, and my daughter was in gymnastics. The little 5-month-old baby is now in gymnastics, and I had a lot of women that were gymnastics moms that, you know, when we were in practice on Saturday mornings or whatever, that we would all stick together. And one of them was a nurse at the hospital in Santa Barbara. And this particular Saturday morning, you know, a lot of years had gone by, the internet had come up, and, you know, I had never researched near-death experiences or anything, and I kind of buried the whole subject, although the entire situation with the NDE was as clear then as it is now as it was when it first happened. I literally, when I talk about it, I sometimes look down and I can actually see from the ceiling the tops of people's heads and where all the equipment was and everything. I can literally shut my eyes. I've drawn a picture of it before. So I'm sitting next to this mom, and we're at gymnastics at the university where Victor and I both worked at UC Santa Barbara. And this mom is telling me how her mom is going to be dying within hours or a couple days, that, you know, impending death, and how sad she was, and it was, even though she's a nurse, she just was so traumatized by her mom's death. So as I was sitting there, I don't know how it came through to me, but it felt as though my story might help her. So I said, Robin, can I tell you a story? Maybe it'll help? And she said, yeah, go ahead. So I launched into my near-death experience and told what I told you today. At the end, she said, she was in shock. She just was like, Barbara, I'm in the area that would be where people come out of cardiac arrest like you did. And she said, exactly what you explained happened is exactly what happens in a situation like that. She said, you saw it. She said, I've seen other people who've responded that they've had a near-death experience. And I said, a what? A near-death experience, that's what that is. Now I had a term for it. Wow, man, that was really amazing. I had a term for it, and I had a computer. I could go home and start searching. So Victor will remember, because I was married to Victor by then. But for like 3 days straight, I was on the computer like, looking up everything I could find. So I ended up finding the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, which is run by Dr. Jeffrey Long and Jody Long, his wife, and you've had him here as a speaker years ago. Very good friend of mine now, and friend of Diane's as well. And there were so many experiences that he had captured, and the people had submitted them to him, and he had also submitted back to them a series of questions so that he could have information he was gathering for research he was doing. So somewhere in that 3-day span, I ended up writing up my near-death experience very briefly and submitting it to his website. I got back some sort of a little email that said, thank you for submitting it, and 2 years went by. Well, okay, that wasn't really kind of a dead end, because, you know, I submitted it and nothing really happened until he called me 2 years later and said, introduced to himself and said, the Discovery Channel is interested in reenacting your near-death experience because they've gone through my 5,000 or so NDEs, and because you actually validated in front of your doctors, that's very valuable. In my life, what had happened was it took me 3 years to leave my husband. I had to make sure that I was safe. I was scared of what he would do. I very carefully planned it out. And finally, when he went on a business trip for a week to Montreal, Quebec, Canada, the very first day I went out to look for an apartment. I moved into an apartment with my son, who was then in 8th grade, and my old daughter, who was probably about 5 years old at the time. And she was 3 years old at the time. And then 2 years passed, and we were in that apartment, and my son in 8th grade met Victor's daughter, who was in 7th grade, and ended up making us go to a movie with them. And now almost 26 years later, he's my hero, guys, and he's followed me everywhere. He allows me to talk about this as freely as I need to, and I'm hoping I'm helping people by doing that. He's at every one of my IANDS meetings. He's my big support system. Prior to finding him, I spent that 2 years when I was alone with my 2 children, not only just going to their school events and doing the things that I needed to after work, but I would, at home before I went to sleep, after they were asleep, I would think about what kind of character traits would I want in someone that I would want to trust in my life. I don't know why I did this. It wasn't like I saw something. I don't watch TV, so I didn't see it on Oprah. I had a spiral notebook next to my bed, and I started listing down character traits. The first 80 are pretty easy. You want somebody who's kind, and who's considerate, who's loving, who's gentle to your children, who's going to be supportive, who's patient. You list all those. After about 80, it gets pretty hard. So I started looking around in my life as I would do my things with my kids, or I was out at my workplace, or whatever it happened to be, and I would look for character traits in people. What were the good traits? And I would find them and see things, and I would put them in a little piece of paper in my pocket, and when I'd go home that night, I would put them on my list. So by the time 2 years had passed, I had 206 things. Now, a couple of them were pretty funny, because my husband being 7 feet tall, one of my things was, he needs to be tall. In college, I dated a guy. I kind of never did that. My sister is 6'3" and I'm 5'9". We're big girls. And it feels weird, like, it felt weird if you had this guy who was shorter than you. You're kind of like, yes, I'm not going to wear high heels. I'm going to, scoot down. And so, so I dated this guy, and he was shorter than me. We went to a dance, and he laid his head on my shoulder while we were dancing. Oh my God, I thought I was going to die. And so I was like, needs to be tall. I didn't say 7 foot, but, sometimes we get rewarded. And I also had down there, after, cooking all the dinners and making the lunches for my kids and breakfasts and stuff for the 2 years that I've been on my own, and I've been making all the dinners, lunches, and breakfasts at home too. I put down, I still like TV dinners because I'm so tired of cooking. So I'm rewarded with somebody who has all those 206 things and makes me breakfast every morning and makes about 90% of our dinners. So I'm pretty rewarded, and I just put that list out there, got the guy. So what ends up happening is that I don't know where our timing is, so you be sure to tell me when I need to.
Okay.
Okay, and what time are we?
We'll take a break from 3 to 3:30.
Okay, great, I have about 7 minutes. So we end up, having this happy life in Santa Barbara. He had 2 children, I had 2 children, and right after we got married, right before we got married, we went down and we decided between us that, the 4 children were enough for us and that we would go have a vasectomy. He would go have a vasectomy. So we did that, he did that. And about 2 months after the marriage, I was thinking, I feel kind of funny. I feel like I'm pregnant. And he said, no, we had the vasectomy. It couldn't be. So I went and got an EPT test, took it, it was on a Saturday or something, and I was upstairs in our house, and I called down the stairs, and I said, Victor! Victor! And I stood on the stairs, and I said, I'm pregnant, I'm holding up a little blue thing. And he looks at me and he goes, it'll be an adventure. I'm 39 years old. That wasn't the adventure I was planning for. So about 6 months into the pregnancy, Victor has the flu. And this is about how the other side began talking to me. So it had been happening for many years before. I'll cover a couple of those, but this was a fun one. 6 months in, he has the flu. I go into the freezer to get an ice pack out, and I open the freezer door, and it's just before Thanksgiving, and the frozen turkey's in the freezer. And for some reason, right here, it hits me. I'm gonna have an 11-pound baby. My last one was 8.5, my daughter. My son was 7.5. And I'm 39 years old, and I'm having an 11-pound baby. So I went running into him, and I'm like, oh, I just got an intuition moment. And he knew that I got those, because he'd seen a lot of other unfoldings before. And he said, well, you know, why don't you talk to your doctor about it? So 3 different visits, I tried to, on the first 2, I just was like, could we check? I know we had an ultrasound in the 3rd week, but could we just check to see if this is going to be a really oversized baby? The doctor's like, no way, no, there's no reason. Your first was 7.5, the second was 8.5, no way. Just because your husband's tall doesn't mean that. No. That doesn't equate. So the last visit is 2 weeks before the baby's due date. And I sit down in his office and I say, okay, I'm going to level with you. By then I was out of the closet a little bit with my near-death experience stuff because of Victor being so accepting. I said, I'm a near-death experiencer and I died. And I said, I have this intuition that comes to me from the other side. And I said, I know I'm having an 11-pound baby. I need you to listen to me. We need to do an ultrasound or whatever you need to do to check on this, but this is it. He goes, what? Are you kidding? He goes, that's ridiculous. He goes, you're just trying to scare yourself. He goes, we're not going to do an ultrasound. So he said, and he also said, he echoed what the other doctor had said before. I said, if you want to keep talking about this, why don't you find yourself another OBGYN? Well, I was working full-time, had 4 kids, pregnant. I had to sit there and talk to this side and say, you know what? I need your help on this one. I need your help, please. So the day of the birth came, we got to the hospital in Crowning, hits me in the living room, that 11-pound baby is there. He delivers the head before he realizes the rest of the baby's not going to come out. So he panics with the baby's head in his hand, and he turns around with his rolly chair and screams down the hallway, is there another doctor in the near vicinity? I need assistance, stat! And no one comes. So he turns around to us, I'm in the middle of delivering a baby, and my husband's standing there, and he says, I'm going to have to break its shoulders to get it out. Victor burst into tears, actually, and I was just beyond it all, and I just sent up a big giant prayer and said, please, 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 I know you gave me the information. He didn't listen. Please help the baby. Please help me. Please help us get out of this situation. So the baby was delivered. They have APGAR scores where they rank them from 1 to 10 in the first minute and at the 5-minute mark. The baby had a 1, a 0 is dead. 1 in the first minute, a 3 at the 5-minute mark. He's now my 6'6", 24-year-old son, and he's in Canada with his girlfriend's family, and he's a happy camper. He's a really nice guy. But that wasn't because of that doctor's experience. I really felt the help come through when I asked for it. And I think that we all have that capacity, whether or not we've had a near-death experience. If you understand the other side is there, they will be there to help you. Another example of that was that I was up talking in San Francisco. We only have 2 minutes. I'm going to hold that one off. So after you come back, you will be amazed at the next story. It's 3 o'clock, let's have fun. Is it Tough for the people in the back to hear me?
No.
Okay, is that better? Okay, Howard's having tough trouble. I love Howard already, so I have to talk louder, if you don't mind. Okay. So, about 4 years ago, I was up speaking in San Francisco, and there were 4 groups up there. Oh, I just cut off. Sorry.
Diane's working on it.
Diane. I can yell. Okay, now it's back. Okay, how about that? Is that better?
If you stay away, maybe if you stay away from the other microphone,
Yeah.
maybe get the feedback.
I think over here is better, is that okay? Can you hear me, guys? Okay, so I was up in San Francisco, and I had 4 different speaking engagements, and so I'd gone to the different IANDS groups, and Victor was driving me home, and we'd stopped in San Luis Obispo, which is about an hour and a half north of us, and had dinner with Victor's son by his previous marriage, and then we got up just north of Santa Barbara. It's about 30 miles north of us. It's called the Gaviota Coast. They've had oil spills there. It's been pretty famous. So the roadway, the highway 101, comes from inland, and then it hits the ocean, and it makes this curve, and it starts going down right along the bluffs above the beach and the ocean. Beautiful area. So we go around that corner, and it's also a very known high wind area. This was in June. I'm not sure why we would have 60 to 70 mile an hour gusts in that area that day, but we did. And this gust hit the side of the car, our van, our Toyota van, and I was leaning back in my seat. I relaxed my seat backwards, which I know is dangerous to do, but I had my seatbelt on, and I had my stockinged feet up on the dashboard. I was just relaxing. And as this gust hit the side of the van, I watched as Victor struggled with the steering wheel to keep the van under control. And so I thought, okay. And I said, Victor, you know what, I don't think that we should continue doing 70 miles an hour if we're going to have gusts like that. I think maybe we should slow down. How about we do 50? He goes, yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a good idea. And so he slows down to 50. And I think, okay, we're safe. Good. And I'm laying back in my little thing and looking out the window, and the moon is out, and the ocean's off to the right-hand side, and I'm thinking everything's okay. And then a voice goes in my right ear, danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. Now, I've had enough of these voices in my life to know, listen. So I put my feet on the floor, and I sat my seat upright, and then I turned to Victor, and I made sure my seatbelt was all tight against me, because if you're going to hit an impact, you better be tight in your seatbelt. And Jeff Olson told the story about his seatbelt cutting through his abdomen and into his intestinal tract. I did not want to have that happen. So I turned to Victor and I said, you know how I sometimes hear from the other side? I said, I just heard danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. So something really dangerous is up ahead. So we need to slow down more so we'll have more time to react to it. So let's do 30 miles an hour. And he looks over and he goes, Barbara, we're on the freeway. And I said, I turned around and looked through the center of the car, and there were no cars behind us. So I said, well, there's nobody behind us, so nobody's going to care whether we're doing 30 miles an hour or not. If you see some car lights coming, why don't you speed back up to 50 if that makes you comfortable. But then the minute they pass us, you can slow back down to 30 because we're going to need stopping time. I said, okay. So we slowed down to 30. 10 minutes later, no cars had passed us. The CHP had closed the freeway behind us. We did not know that. What we were heading for was right around the corner. We came around the corner, way up ahead in the dark. There's no street lights up that way at all. It's like there's an old oil manufacturing plant or oil receiving off the, they have these oil rigs that are offshore and, pipes that come into these guys. So there's nothing up there. And we see a police car that's in, the dark way up ahead, and the lights are on. And I got my intuition moment right there, and it told me that that was where the danger was. So I'm intently, watching this police car as it's approaching. We're only doing 30 miles an hour, and as we get close enough to it, I realize, wait a minute, why, I didn't say it out loud, but I said, why is the police car stopped in the slow lane, not off the freeway? There's nobody in front of the police car, but he's blocking the slow lane with his lights on. And as we got closer, I noticed there was no policeman inside the car, nor was he anywhere within the lights, that his lights on top of his car were a radius around his car. So where's the police officer? So I'm trying to figure that out as we're approaching, and Victor is in the slow lane doing 30, and so he starts to change lanes to go over in the fast lane to go around the police car. It's still ahead of us. Just as that happened, whoever it is on the other side that helps me, I don't know if there's multiple people, or I don't know who it is, I don't say, hey, who is it that's helping me? It doesn't sound like my grandfather or anything like that when they talk to me. I don't know who it is, but they literally grabbed my upper arms, both of them, and I felt them grab me, and then I felt their face, nose to nose, right in front of my face, and they screamed 10 miles an hour at the top of their lungs. So I was so freaked that they were touching me and they were right in front of my face that I screamed 10 miles an hour and echoed it. And Victor slowed down. We were just coming up level with the police car, so right as we got level with the police car, side by side, we were doing 10 miles an hour, and just as we slid past it, our lights finally lit up. The police car had stopped way back where he should have probably stopped further forward. He thought the freeway was closed and no one would approach. The semi-truck that had tipped over on its side with the dirty bottom facing the people that were coming towards it was clear ahead, and it was diagonal across the two lanes with the cab of the truck in the fast lane, the start of the towed part in the slow lane, and the rest of the truck off the side of the freeway. And so we were heading in the fast lane for the cab of the truck. So Victor doing 10 miles an hour instead of 50, 30, or whatever, he was able to go right off the edge of the freeway into the gravel. There was a guardrail, and he was able to go right around with complete control around the front of the truck. And on the far side, I actually went into shock when I saw the truck, because it's so amazing when this unfolds. And you're part of it, you're like, did that just happen? And I looked, and there on top of the truck was the police officer. He was standing and he was talking in through, I guess, a window on the side of the truck to the truck driver who was trapped inside. So he was standing up on top of the truck. If you all know trucks, they have their gas tanks in the cab, and that's part of the cab system because you don't have it with whatever you're towing. So had we hit that doing some speed, the bottom of the truck, we could have ignited those gas tanks. We would have killed the police officer, killed the truck driver most likely, and killed ourselves. But instead, that was diverted that night. So the second that we were past the truck, I began saying in my heart, thank you so much for intervening in this situation. I'm here on this earth to do your work. As long as you want me to do your work, I'm here for you. When you want me to come home, I'm ready to come home. If you have somebody that needs my help, if you'll put them in front of me and give me the resources to help them, I'm here to help. So I was saying that and talking to the other side, which I do all the time. I literally talk to them. You don't need to be in a church, and you don't need to do that stuff. You can literally have that connection straight up anywhere you are, any place you are. So Victor, about 10 miles down the road, is getting completely silent. He just watched all this unfold. And then he goes, Barbara, how is it that you're able to do that? Married 25 plus years, I like to know, he said, it's not me doing it. You have to understand, it's the other side. They want to make a difference in our lives. If we'll only listen to them, then we get that help. But when we don't believe that they're there, whoever they are, doesn't have, you can call them anything you want to. God doesn't care when you call him Susie Tidball. He's there, he loves you. And so he wants to help, and whether he sends down, whether it was him up there on the scene next to me, or, my higher self, or the source, or whatever, who knows? They're there. They're there. Understand they're there. Understand you can ask for help. And believe me, it just comes through. Be the good person in your life that helps others. Be the person who says, I'm here to be a helpful person to you. And when you're ready to send me home, bring me home, baby. So I just said it was, the other side that was helping. So he has watched this type of thing unfold for many years in front of him. So he listens to me. So men, no, women, no. Everybody, listen and learn. This is real. So when I was at that first IANDS meeting that I found, IANDS, something very incredible happened. I had that near-death experience at age 31. By this time, it was 15 or something, even more years later. Went to that IANDS meeting in San Diego 2009, so you do the math. It was 1987 when it happened to be. This was San Diego 2009. And Dr. Jeffrey Long had asked me if I wanted to go to the conference, and I actually at the time thought, wow, 5 kids at home, Victor will take care of the kids, I get to go to San Diego for 3 days, woo! I wasn't really excited about the IANDS stuff yet, or really, not really unfolded it in my life yet, wasn't quite sure I wanted to. So, I'm standing there at the very first night. It's a meet and greet. There's wine and hors d'oeuvres. And I asked a couple people that were at the desks that were obviously helpers, can you tell me who Jeffrey Long is? And so they pointed him out. So I got a chance to meet him and his wife. And so I was standing there with them, and I was kind of a little bit nervous. I didn't really know that much about NDEs, and these guys looked and sounded like they knew a lot. So I was just going to be a little quiet person and listening to everything. And they started, their theme that year was on after effects, what those NDEers can happen in their lives that shows that they were NDEers. So as they were talking about that, and it was, the after effects of intuition, being a person who cares about the world and tries to do good things, hating bright lights, loud noises. As they were saying these things, I'd never heard of these after effects before, and my first thoughts were, wait a minute, why do I identify with the after effects all the way back to my earliest childhood memories when I didn't have my near-death experience till I was 31? So I was standing there listening to everybody and trying to figure that one out. And there was a really sweet lady standing next to me. And when they kind of stopped talking in a larger group, then I turned to her and I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand why I would, if those are after effects, why would I have them before my near-death experience? I feel like I've had those ever since I was young. And she took my hands, and it was PMH Atwater. I never know who she was. I was like, okay. And she said, my dear, I think you ought to talk to your family to see if there was something that happened to you in your early life that maybe you weren't told about or you don't remember. And I have to admit that I thought, okay, these people are a bit crazy. They think that I had more than one of these things? But during that conference, something kept popping up, and I'm sure it was a reminder from the other side. What kept popping up was that very strong, powerful mom that I had, even the soft moments of my life when she would maybe be brushing my hair. It was only a few times that I remembered this happening. She said something to the effect of, I'm really glad that you're here. We almost lost you at one point, but I'm glad you stayed. Now, she never explained to me what she was talking about, and as a child, I never thought to ask. I think the last time she might have said that to me was like when I was 15 or 16 years old, and that was the least of my worries at that time. I had no care or concern about what she was talking about. So that kept popping up in my head during the conference, and I thought, wow, okay, how would I ever find out if anything happened? My parents were both dead. But I have an older brother who's 10 years older than me, and we were going up to Oregon because Victor was being honored at Oregon State University for his basketball career there before he went and played over in Netherlands and Italy and the NBA for Golden State Warriors. So we were heading up there anyway, and so I called my brother ahead of time and said, can we go to dinner with you? And he's my half-brother. His dad died during the Korean War, jet fighter pilot in Japan. And my brother was about 6 years old when his dad died. So when my mom remarried, then I was born. I have 2 older brothers that are half-brothers and an older sister that lost their dad. So I called my brother and I said, let's do dinner. And we all met for dinner. And at the dinner, I really had thought about this a lot beforehand, and I thought, I've never told anybody in my family about my near-death experience. I'm not going to tell him now. So how am I going to ask him if I had another one or something? You know, I could have been, how am I going to do this? Well, I thought about, okay, Brad, I'm going to do a complete life history of all of my medical things that happened since birth. So I remember when I did this and that, and I'm going to research to try to find out when my vaccinations were, and you know, stuff like that. So do you remember anything that I might not remember that you could, you know, add to this big history that I'm going to make of myself? So he said, well, I can't think of anything. Nope, I'll think about that. About a week later, called me and said, Barb, there's something I need to apologize to you for. So when you asked me that, I couldn't think of anything that he said. It came to me. He said, I've actually thought about telling you this multiple times in your life, but in the times that I thought about it, and came forward for me, either weren't good times for you in your life, or wasn't a good time for me in my life. He said, but I'm going to tell you now, you died when you were 18 months old. What? I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? What? What happened? Well, you were only a little kid, of course, and you had a very high fever. I don't know what you were sick with, but you had a very, very high fever. And Mom had been trying to cool you down. She was pregnant with Jan, my little sister. And he said you went into convulsions and you stopped breathing. He said, of course, Mom panicked. Your dad called fire department. There's no 911 back in Salem, Oregon at that point. And the fire department, in talking to my dad, they told my dad to tell my mom to put me into tepid bath water, my body, and then that they were sending the ambulance, and that she was supposed to add ice cubes to the water slowly to slowly lower my body temperature, because a shock possibility, if you put a child that's already having a medical problem into icy cold water, it could cause the body to go into shock. So my mom, we only had like 1 tray of ice cubes in 1958, and so my mom sent my brothers, 2 older brothers, to go off to the neighbors to get more ice. And so he was away. He said my mom was sobbing, you know, she put the bath water in, she'd added the 1 tray of ice cubes, and he said he was gone, he thinks, I don't know, 5 to 8 minutes or so. He said when he came back, I was very bluish purple. And he stood in the doorway, handed the ice to my mom, and then my other brother showed up and handed his ice, and they were standing there in the doorway watching the situation, and my mom is sobbing, my dad's on the phone, yelling at the fire department to get the ambulance there. And he said, all of a sudden they heard the ambulance pull up in front of the house and the siren was winding down. And he said, just as that happened, they were standing in the doorway, he said, you came back to life. He said, you arched your back backwards, Mom was holding you in the water, he said, you arched your back backwards, took a big deep breath, and he said, that oxygen getting into you turned you red again, and he said, you burst into tears, and you were crying, and he said, but you were alive. And he said the ambulance people came through the front door, and they wrapped you up, and they took you off in the ambulance, and then his mom and dad were getting ready, you know, to go to the hospital to follow the situation. He said my older sister, who was 6 years old at the time, came up from downstairs. We had a babysitter that helped my mom during that time because she had 4 children and was pregnant with the 5th. And my sister said to my mom and dad as they were going out the front door, why was Barbie having a temper tantrum? And my mom stopped and said, why would you say that? And she said, because Grandma Mize told me that Barbie was having a temper tantrum and would not be come upstairs. And my mom looked over, my brother remembers, over the top of my older sister's head and said, I'll deal with you when I get back. And they never saw Grandma Mize again. So Grandma Mize got fired. My older sister, who's 6, remembers the incident because of that. She never saw that grandma again. She was very upset about that because she liked the lady. And my mom was a no-nonsense type of person and just fired her for what she had said to my sister. So finding that out was really huge for my life because those after effects had always been very hard for me to understand why I was different than my siblings. My mom sometimes called me the black sheep of the family because I was so different. Even though I wasn't drugging and I wasn't drinking and I wasn't being bad, for some reason what I did was so different that it was hard for her to accept. So one of the things that happened was when I was 5, my mom was standing on a street corner holding my little sister's hand, she was 3, and then my hand. And all of a sudden, you never did this, I broke my mom's grip and I put my hands over my face and I was hiding. And my mom, no nonsense, turns and says, and I remember peeking through my hands and she had a look on her face and she said, what are you doing? And I said, they're going to crash. That's all I could only say, they're going to crash. And as I'm trying to peek through my hands, the car that was going through the intersection on the green light was hit by a car that ran the intersection on the red light, T-boned the car, and right in front of us, we were standing on the corner and it happened right in front of us. And my mom was so freaked out over that she got down on one knee and she said, she took both my shoulders and she kind of shook me and she said, don't you ever tell anyone you can do that. So I kind of had to learn to hide those things. I didn't know why nobody else got those kind of messages, and when I got them, I kind of couldn't tell people. So that was hard for me as a young person. Then I got into high school, and there's a lot of the 1970s, there's a lot of drinking and a lot of kids trying alcohol and stuff, and my friends kind of knew that I just didn't want to do that. So they still were friends with me, and so they would say, do you want to go to Kegger with us on Saturday night? Well, I'd be the only one with the 7-Up, I pretend there was something else in that 7-Up, but I could act as drunk as any of them. But I wasn't drinking. We're at a Kegger, and it's way out in the boondocks in west of Salem, Oregon, towards the beach. And the girls had known where this Kegger was. I didn't drive at that time. And so I was with the 3 girls that were friends. And there was about 100 kids out on this big cement driveway. There was a long road, gravel road that came up to this house. And I assume they owned all the property around their house. There were trees that were planted along the gravel road that kind of all met overhead. So it was kind of like a tunnel that you went up to. So we had parked the car along with 100 other cars, or however many were there, and we were up at this Kegger. And the 3 girls were pretty drunk by this time. There was lots of music, lots of kids in college, but we were in high school. And, it was cool to be there. I was having fun. And all of a sudden, I don't know how it works, but my eyes just blinked really fast. And when I blinked my eyes really fast, I saw that there were a line of police cars coming down that gravel road on a silent approach. That means their lights were on, but their sirens were off. And they were coming along with a paddy wagon to arrest those underage drinkers. So I realized these girls were going to get in a lot of trouble. Plus, if my mom found out that I was at that Kegger, I was going to get my butt kicked too. So I said, come on you guys, and dragged them off into this underbrush. Nobody really cared. We're a bunch of people out there. These 4 girls are disappearing off into the bushes. Well, the cops arrived, started arresting, checking IDs. They had, they had a big bunch of cops. I don't know why they would think that was the most important thing they needed to do on that Saturday night. But anyway, they put a bunch of people in the paddy wagon, and a couple hours later, we're still out there in the bushes. One of the girls has thrown up on my foot. I'm not very pleased with her at that point. I'm trying to keep them quiet because they're, still on the verge of being drunk. Finally, we make it through the 2 hours or so, the cops are gone. We think it's safe enough to go, walk back to our car. We're walking back to the car, and one of the girls goes, "Hey, how come you knew the cops were coming?" She's not saying, "Thank you for saving my butt." She's saying, "How come you knew the cops were coming?" I said, "Well, I don't know how it works." I said, "I just blinked my eyes. I don't know why it happens sometimes, but I knew that they were coming. I saw them coming down the road. When I blinked my eyes, I saw them coming." And she goes, "Are you a witch?" No. Well, at school, at our high school, she started the rumor around the school that I was a witch. And that was really rough. So I ended up losing her as a friend because she literally wouldn't stop. And I had to tell her, you're gone out of my life now, because if you can't stop doing that, that's not okay. So it was hard to be having those types of interactions with people. They didn't understand. I had to keep it quiet. I had to not show what these gifts were when I would get help, and I would have this, either a voice or some type of help. One of the good things of the help is that I'm really, really lucky. So I was in my senior year of high school. There was a brand new mall opening up, and they were giving away a Ford Pinto. Well, I didn't have a car, and I actually didn't have a driver's license in my senior year of high school, but I nagged my mom. We were walking through the mall, and I said, Mom, can we enter the contest? And she said, "Barbie, you couldn't win a dirty sock." I still remember. You couldn't win a dirty sock. So I said, "But please, come on, can we just enter it?" You have to be a driver's license. I'm reaching into her purse, grab into her wallet, her driver's license, and I go and I enter my mom's name in the contest. And out of 60,000 entries, they drew my mom's entry. And my mom gave that Ford Pinto away to my older brother. But when we go to contests and stuff, we're at fundraisers in Santa Barbara. I'll be sitting there. Victor just loves to watch this unfold. They'll have you buy the $20 worth of the tickets that they're giving away for all these things they're gonna give away. So I've got my 20 tickets and I'm holding them like, so we've got this, your car is gonna get lubed and oil changed, and this next ticket that we draw is you're gonna win that. And I'm like, I don't think so, Jack. So then, we're going to have a spa day, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. So then I'm going, Barbara Bartolome. And they call out, Barbara Bartolome. And Victor goes, "How do you do that?" It's not me, it's the other side. So the most important thing in my talk is understanding that the other side is there. Understanding that. Using them to ask for your help. Being a person on earth that wants to be someone who will help them have a hand in other people's lives. So if you see something that you can do to be kind, to be helpful, to love on someone, like Diane mentioned, this wonderful woman is in this nursing home area and doesn't have any family. How many of you are going to go visit her? Come on, guys. Good. It takes half an hour of your time. It takes a little bit of love. It takes a little bit of attention. But that's a gift you're going to see at the end of your life. You're going to see how you touched that woman's life in those few moments, even if you go multiple times. But it's this touching of other people's lives. It's this love that you give to other people that is the most important thing that you can have here. Not big houses, not big egos, not big cars, not the cutest girlfriends, not the cutest guys. It doesn't matter. That stuff doesn't matter. It's all about your heart. It's about your love. It's about your generosity. It's about how you're touching other people. Because that's what you're going to see in that final life review. It's been said 1.5 million times over by all these NDEers that are out there. They didn't get judged. I wasn't judged up on that ceiling. I was loved. I was warmly accepted. I felt wonderful. I was totally me up there above my body, the same way that I had been in that wetsuit that was laying down below. This was just a vehicle I was using, my soul, to have experiences here and to be able to touch lives. That's what we're all here for. So I have lots of stories that I can tell you that have happened where they've touched my life. They've talked and said, you know, do this and guided me. Diane has those stories too. There are a lot of us that get those. So understand that that's your life purpose. Find where you can make a difference. Find the love and the time and the get away from the I need to do this and I need to do that, but understand that when you're doing those special things, even if it's something as simple as opening a door for someone and giving a smile, you don't know what their life is like. And it doesn't mean we all have to be perfect. If you do something crappy on the freeway, I am going to cuss at you. I am not perfect. Ask my husband. So, but it's a point in my heart of wanting to be good. Wanting to be good, wanting to do good things. That's the most important thing. I think that you're forgiven for all the things that you do, that poopy things in the world. But I think that you're celebrated for the things that you do that are special to someone else and touches their life. So my whole story is about that, and I really feel that my near-death experience was, both of them were gifts to open me up, to help me to grow in this way, to serve my purpose, which is to talk about this out in the world and to touch lives in the way that I do. So it doesn't matter to me where I go, and it doesn't matter to me what it costs me. It literally is important for me to give that gift to you and hope that you'll go out, give it to somebody else, refer them to Diane's talks that are online for you guys to see on YouTube. Give it to somebody else. Put the flyers up about her group here out there in your community, at your work, at your coffee shop, at the places that you visit. Tell your friends to come. Get this word out there in the world, because this is life-changing. And if people can accept and understand that near-death experiencers are giving this message out, then I think it will be a better world. And we all need that. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't very pretty. So help, be good, love people. And if anybody has any questions, I don't know if I'm ending early or anything, but I'm happy to answer questions.
55 minutes.
We do. Let's see, more stories. Let's see. You think one I missed? Victor? Oh, question. You want to do a question? Okay, okay. I was going to think of other stories. What have I missed? Okay.
My husband wants to know if we are to believe that Victor really has 206 good characteristics.
He does. Oh my gosh, he has 206 plus more. Yeah, I don't really deserve him. I sometimes think, how did I get so lucky? That list was amazing. Yeah, and you know, it was funny because when we first started to date, I didn't tell him about the list. And it was like maybe 4 or 6 months in, I was like, I have a list, and you know, I've been checking off the things that you match up, and he's like, what? I'm surprised he married me. But no, he has actually the Gentle Giant guys, and he's like, at the university, he has students who get these huge student loans. They get out of school, they think, oh, I'm gonna be able to pay that all back. And man, it's hard to find a job, or they get laid off, and all of a sudden they're panicking. Panic, panic, panic. Guess who got to talk to all those students all those years for the University of California, Santa Barbara? 36 years. That guy, day in, day out, talked with students that were in trauma mode, ready to jump off the cliff over their student loans, and he helped them get out of default and helped them deal with their issues. Right? he got so many thank you notes, and people would come into the university that lived far away, and they'd be back visiting the university, showing their husband and children, and they would come into the Clark office where Victor worked, billing and accounts receivable, and they would want to meet Victor after all those years. So I got the best guy ever. So if you ever need anything in your life, do the 206 things, whatever it might be. I think, I think that works. I don't know who decided that was, like, somebody, maybe, what was it, that book that was, The Secret. That was it, yeah. I don't know how I figured that out, but it worked for me. So, yes, he is my wonderful guy. Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you talk more about the after effects, or like kind of common after effects of people with NDEs who have NDEs?
Yeah. So it's on the IANDS website. There's a whole list of characteristics of near-death experiencers that I haven't memorized, but the ones that affected me the most was the intuition part, of being able to, hear from the other side and know what was going to happen ahead of time. Oh, story. 9 years old, I wake up in the morning and I have a dream. So I went into my mom. She's smoking a cigarette and drinking her coffee in the dining area. Mom, I had this dream. I saw myself as an adult. I had this thing in my hand that was a telephone and a TV. It was an iPhone. 9 years old. I explained to my mom that I saw an iPhone in my hand and I was talking to them and I could see the visuals on it. That was a long time before those iPhones came out, baby. Dang, why didn't I talk to Steve Jobs and get ready on that? Anyway, yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty awesome to have the experiences, but when you're living with that and you have these, you're different, and people don't understand that you're different and why you might be different. Nowadays, I think it's much easier. I was going on G56. So in the 1960s, me being different was very bad. And so my mom didn't want me to be different. And no one understood. So I had no one to go to. Now, I've got another cool story. About a month ago, we decided to clean out a garage area that we have, and we were cleaning out these boxes and stuff, and wow, I found a time capsule. My dad had died 27 years ago. At the time, I wasn't married to Victor, and I had not the support system. I had my ex-husband who had basically been very unsupportive through the whole process. I'd gone up to Oregon. My younger sister had gone up to Oregon. We were his two children. And after the funeral, which was shocking to me, I'd just been up there a month before, and I didn't think he was going to die. His wife, who he had remarried, had been with quite a long time, had put all of his personal effects on their bed over the comforter, and told us we got to choose, what do we want to do, flip a coin and somebody choose first. My little sister and I were faced with dividing up my dad's stuff, which was very traumatic for me. So, interestingly, my dad had a box with both of our names on it, one with her, named Jan, and one with me, Barbie. So we took that, plus we flipped a coin, and we divided up the rest of the stuff. Well, at the time, I'm in the middle of, this trauma, being married to this person, and I put my dad's box someplace where I thought that I would access it, and then I didn't. And then when I went through the divorce, of course, it got moved over, and it was probably put into the garage little unit that I had where my little apartment was, and I didn't access it. And then when I moved in with Victor, I went down into the garage, and I didn't even know that it was there. So 27 years pass, I open my dad's box, and there's these papers that are in an envelope, and it's like about that thick, it's like maybe an inch thick, and I take them and I slide them out, and I remember, oh yeah, my dad had this writing class that he did in the last 10 years of his life. He lived at a senior center, it was called Woodburn Senior Estates, and so, had a home there, and so he did this writing class. And he talked to me a couple times during that period of time on the phone and said, I'm writing a story about something, and well, I'm in the middle of my life, and I'm also in the middle of, trying to deal with this person, and yeah, Dad, that's cool. Oh my gosh, that's really neat. I hope I get to read that. Well, he never sent them to me. I never read them. So I take this sheet of papers out, and I read the first one, and it's about he went to Oregon State University as well as Victor. He was in the same fraternity as Victor. So my dad had already died when I met Victor. Do you think he was one of those people who helped push Victor towards me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm reading the OSU thing, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Victor's going to love this. And it was back about OSU in the 1930s. And so, wow. And Victor wasn't there till the 60s. And so, wow, this is cool. The second story is about my dad's near-death experience. He never told me. It was about 1939 or something. Yeah, 39. He was in the Navy. He was 29 years old. I think he was born in 1913. So it was maybe, whatever the time is on that. And he was in the Navy, and he was stationed in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And it was during the summer, and it was a very hot day, so he said about 20 of the recruits, and my dad was a swimming instructor for the Navy. And so he and 20 of the recruits went out and were swimming in the lake. And he had, at Oregon State, had been on the swim team and did every stroke. He was an amazing swimmer, and he had been a swimming instructor in Salem and a swimming instructor in Corvallis, and he had swimming in his blood. So he swam, he decided, these guys were all goofing off and doing stuff at the lake, and so he decided to swim all the way across the lake and back again, and he said a slow crawl, so he's just, gently swimming. He said the last 200 yards, he decided to swim his best competitive stroke, which would be fast. So he swam very fast the last 200 yards, got out of the lake, went up to his towel, and laid down. It was a very hot day, and he said within minutes he felt very woozy, like he was going to faint. So he thought, oh, it's probably because I got out of the kind of chilly water up in Idaho in the summertime, and probably because it's so hot out. So I'll go back down and get in the water again, and it'll probably solve the problem. So he went down to the water's edge, and a couple of the guys were about 100 yards offshore, and he said he decided to swim underwater and come up and grab one of their legs to scare them, just to have fun. My dad loved to do little funny things like that. The problem is, if you've never heard of it, shallow water blackout happens when you've exercised and exerted your body, and the carbon dioxide and the oxygen levels get interrupted. And if you hold your breath, then you will pass out. So my dad dove underwater, had swam a ways before he fainted underwater, and his body sunk to the bottom. He said he separated from his body and looked and saw his body down on the bottom of the lake between two large rocks. And he said that he then looked up and he saw a tunnel, typical tunnel. He said there was a being who was motioning to him very calmly, like, come on, it's time to go. And he said, he realized, oh my God, I just died. And he said, no, I'm not going yet. And he said he found himself right back into his body, kicked himself up to the surface, got air. Of course, he had water in his lungs. He got to the side of the water, and he said he had to spend about 20 minutes coughing up. Everything was in his lungs and everything. And he said that day changed his life, changed his focus, caused him to be the kind-hearted person. The after effects all got into him. He cared about other people. He was very genuine. He would talk to people in the grocery store line. He was friendly. He just was outgoing and gentle and kind and sweet and nice. And that was just who he was. And that's what I grew up watching him be. I never knew that he had a near-death experience, and he never knew that I had one. I'm pretty sure that he was, obviously aware that I died when I was 18 months old, but for some reason, he never made the connection that he should talk to me about his near-death experience, and he never told me. My mom and dad, my brother said, had agreed not to talk about mine when I was a young child. So, very interesting that I would find out that information in my life. I think that's one of the biggest gifts for me, to find that information that, it's not just me and my family that had it happen. Everybody had it happen. too. I'm very proud of that. Yeah. Is there any other questions? Oh, yeah, over here.
Yes, I resonate a lot with so much of your life and your experiences, as well as the whole intuition of thinking of something and then something happens. And I at least have had a witness to some of these things, thank
That's helpful.
God. Because really, you kind of feel
A
alone.
little wacky. Yeah, it's
Do
like-
you feel that people can develop that more? Or do you think just being in tune and aware, it will develop on its own? But, do you think that people should try to push it to really develop,
I don't think I have an opinion on that.
Okay,
I don't,
yeah.
because I haven't had to push it. I don't want to be a medium. I
Right.
don't want to charge anybody for anything. If
Right.
I've gotten messages, I've given them freely. And
Yeah.
I think that's super important.
No,
That's
I don't
really
mean about
yeah.
being a professional
Yeah,
medium
yeah.
or anything like
But
that,
no,
but just
but
to
really
get
understanding.
better at what to be more in tune, to be able to say, yes, I thought of that and then it happened, or to be
Well,
able
I
to
think
look
the
at it.
intuition, send the intuition, I think the 206
Yeah.
things. And then when I go, to the fundraiser and I win the thing, it's because I'm setting my intuition, my intention on, getting that outcome.
So can we manifest, do you feel we manifest?
I think I do, and I think that people could develop that. And I think it's part of it is that, I very much am so connected to the other side that I think that they, maybe when they see that I want something really badly, then they'll bring it to me.
Right.
I'm not asking them, like, I want that sports car, because I
Right.
don't want that sports
Yeah,
car.
right.
And so, it's easy for that spa day or whatever for them to,
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know. It's a beautiful thing as far as I'm concerned, and I think that people trusting that the other side is there
Yeah.
and using that trust to,
For goodness.
right, exactly, and to help others as well as, sometimes we need to give a little surprise reward, and so, that $20 that I put into that slot machine at the casino ends up being $40 when I walk out of there, and I'm like, it doesn't have to be $2 million. It has, I just when I walk in say, I just hope I don't lose my 20, and then they make it happen, and I feel their touch sometimes, and he watches it happen sometimes. We were on a trip to Oregon, and there were 3 different casinos we stopped at, and the very first casino was only because the person at the restaurant said that there was a casino down the road that had rooms that if you got the player's card, that you could then get the room for $50 a night. So I thought, well, that's great. We're not paying $150 for a hotel room. We'll go to the casino and get the player's card. And they said, when they handed the player's card to us, they said, oh, and it comes with $20 free play. Well, I totally loved winning, and so I was like, oh boy, I'm playing with their money. And we went over to the desk for the hotel, and I showed them player's cards, said we'd like a room for tonight, because that's what our whole goal was. And the hotel people said, oh, sorry, but we're all booked up. And I went, oh, shoot. So Victor said, okay, well, let's go. We'll just go forward further. And I said, but wait a minute, I still have the player's card with $20 on it, and your player's card too. We need to play. And he's like, I don't know why he hasn't learned by now. So we went over, he lost his $20, and I turned my 20 into over 400, which paid for the next few nights of hotels. Or further up in Oregon, we stopped at the casino because I said, oh, let's do the player's card thing again. Well, I got another couple $100 off their player's card. No money of my own in that machine. They're $20 or $10 or whatever their player's card gave me. And then the third time, he's like, if you do that again, this is going to be awesome. This is amazing. Third time, what was it, Roseburg, Oregon. We ended up another $400. I made over $1,000 on their player's card money just by going in there intentionally saying, I need to be able to cover the expense. I was going up to Portland, Oregon to talk to the IANDS group up in Portland and also around in that area doing things. And so they're paying me with those things for me to be able to do that trip, to do their work, to give that message. That's how it works. So I think if you're trying to do good things, you will get those wonderful things happening too. So what else? Let me go ahead.
Your near-death experience sounds similar to what I've read about some people having out-of-body experiences, which, they're up above and they see themselves down below. And how would you compare, does a out-of-body experience also carry some of these after effects, or is it only the near-death
As far as I
experience?
know, yes, an out-of-body experience is part of this near-death experience, because I was in cardiac arrest. I was clinically dead for I'm guessing 8 to 10 minutes is what I think that my time was in that second near-death experience, 8 to 10 minutes that they were trying to resuscitate me. When you have a death situation or some sort of life-threatening situation, or perhaps it even could be in meditation, you can rise above your body. There are car accident situations, there are medical situations, there are drug-induced situations where the person rises up above their body and has a spiritually transformative experience. That is very well documented. That's not, near-death experience is kind of misnamed. It should have been a death experience, and then they should have had near-death being the second category when you didn't actually have a death situation occurring like a car accident or a medical instance or something. So Raymond Moody is a really wonderful, nice guy, but he just in 1975, he didn't know. And also, Bruce Grayson and Kenneth Ring, all the people who were researchers in that area and decided to start doing this, they kind of all settled on near-death experience. And it should really, in my situation, I had a death experience. Nowadays, they've kind of added a new term called near-death-like experience to the category, so there's confusion all over the place with what everything is. But an out-of-body would mean simply you rose out of your body, whether it's during a near-death experience or whether it's during a drug-induced situation or whether it's during something else. You rose to sleep. You could be asleep and be out of your body. A lot of people report in sleep, looking down at their body and seeing their body down below and then ending up going back into their body. So, and doing travel, traveling outside of their home, etc.
Are you familiar with the Monroe Institute?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
They do it intentionally, out of body.
The Monroe
intentionally
Institute
by
on the East Coast. Yeah, they do a lot of training on out-of-body experiences. And also the International Association of Consciousness is in Los Angeles, and I think they have other locations in the United States, and they teach out-of-body courses for you to find that key to get yourself out of your body and have that out-of-body experience.
Are they
So
out of Brazil? I think I've met them too.
I don't know that. I've had the speakers come to my IANDS group in Santa Barbara. It's Luis Minero, Luisminero. He's the director of that Los Angeles group.
I'm sorry, can you give me the acronym again for that?
IAC, International
Yes, I know these.
Association of Consciousness, I think, or International Academy of Consciousness. That's it, Academy of Consciousness.
Thank you.
If I recall your story about your near death, and when the presence was there, that you realized what your life purpose was, if I recall. I don't recall you stating explicitly what that was. I mean,
Well, when I went back in my body, once he did the second precardial thump, I remembered everything of being up on the ceiling and knowing that I knew my life purpose, but then it was covered up. It was like I just knew that. What was my life purpose? So in my body, once I got out of the ceiling area, it was covered. But it was because I was not at all ready to address that. I was in the midst of that abuse. I needed to get away from that husband. I needed to find that new husband. I needed to move in my life to a point where I had the support system around me to be able to do that. So, yeah. I have another story I've got to tell you. So, as I was working at the university in the Graduate School of Education, I was in fundraising with a boss who was so fun, he put the fun in fundraising. So anyway, he was a nice guy, and I loved my job. And one day, our youngest son, our little guy that's now 6'6", he had a bedroom off of our main living room in our house, and I went in to wake him up. And in my pajamas, and I, Tori, it's time to get up. And then shut his door, and I'm walking past a plate glass window that looks over Santa Barbara High School's football field, and I'm kind of walking by, and all of a sudden, this feeling of a grip happens on my back of my head. It felt like two hands were holding the back of my head, but I wasn't quite ready. I wasn't really out of the closet with my near-death experience yet. I wasn't really quite ready to, so I was still kind of pushing all that stuff aside. And I thought, oh my God, I'm having a stroke. So I reached both my hands up and touched my head, and there was of course nothing there. And so as I brought my hands down, I realized, oh my God, all my goosebumps are all over my arms. This is so weird. I'm having a stroke. Maybe I should sit down on the couch. Maybe I should call out to Victor, but that would scare the kids. And I was standing there, and in the middle of my living room, swear to God this happened, this big voice goes, "You will have a scrapbook store." I did not scrapbook. 5 years earlier, I'd gone to an evening thing with one of my girlfriends. Hey, we're going to have this party. We'll bring some pictures of your baby. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, have fun, make a couple pages. This is all cute stuff. I don't have time for this. I have 5 kids. I'm working full time. You will have a scrapbook store. I look up and I go, God, are you talking to me? Because I don't scrapbook and I don't know anything about retail stores. So do you have the wrong house? Wrong neighborhood? No answer. I go tearing through the house. Victor's in our walk-in closet. And I go, oh my God, you'll never believe just happened. I tell him the whole thing. He looks down at me calmly and goes, I think that if you got that big of a message, you should see what it's going to take to get you there. What? Are you kidding me? I have 2 kids in college. We have another one going there next year. We don't have any money to create a scrapbook store. I don't even want to do that. I'm like, what? I'm looking at Victor. He's looking down at me. He doesn't say anything, but his mouth opens up, and the voice from the living room literally talks out of Victor's mouth and says, Barbara, you're the one that received the message. And I'm like, I'm backing away. I sit on the bed. I'm shaking. I'm like, holy crud, what the heck is going on? He fixes breakfast for the kids and me. He comes in with our youngest and says, I'm taking him off to school. And then he says, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, I am definitely not okay. I'm going to be late to work. I don't even know what's going on. So I'm sitting on the bed. Everybody's gone. Finally, I'm just like talking to God in my head, and I'm just like, what was that? Why would you tell me to do that? I don't have any interest in that. How could I be, that's not me, blah, 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 blah. I even forgot that I'd gone to that scrapbook party about 5 years earlier. What I also forgot was, on a trip up to Oregon, we had been visiting one of his friends, and we had been driving along in Portland, and we were just hanging out until his friend got off work. And we went by a store that had a name that had the word scrapbook in it or something. And this was in, 2003 was when I opened my store, so this would have been about 1998. So, at the time, I said to Victor, hey, do we have time? Can we stop at a store? And he said, sure. So I said, turn around, let's go back. And so we pulled in, he parked in front of this, said some sort of scrapbook word. And I said, I just want to go and look inside. So I went inside and I was like, oh my God. And they had tables to do scrapping. There was a couple ladies working there. There was all this whole area of basketball stuff, which I thought, oh my God, I need to do an album about Victor. But, of course, I'm working full-time. I have a couple kids, and they are getting bigger, but, I still don't have any time in my life. I did a lot of volunteering around Santa Barbara. And so I'm just amazed at all the stuff. So I go out to the car and I say, Victor, you've got to come inside and see all this stuff. It's absolutely astonishing. It's nothing like the Michaels row of stuff in, the Michaels store in Santa Barbara. Oh my God, this is a whole store, you can't believe it. So he comes in and he looking around and we're looking at all the basketball stuff and I'm like, and the lady at the front, after we get through the whole store, she is behind the counter and I say, oh my gosh, this is such an incredible store. How did you ever think to open up something like this? And she goes, well, I actually have 3 of them. And she goes, it's a huge industry now. And it's just, really taking off. And there's a lot of manufacturers that are making products. It's the newest, best thing, and women mainly do it. It's just amazing. And I was like, wow, it's just so awesome. I just loved your store. Thank you so much. We're from California. We're visiting. I wish I could come back all the time, but we live far away. Thank you for showing us your store. Thank you. So we get outside, and I say to Victor, it would be my nirvana if I ever got to have a store like that. That would be nirvana for me. And I immediately forgot that I said all that because, it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. We had kids. There's no money for that. So 5 years later, I go to the university late. My boss isn't mad at me. He loves me. I'm sitting at my desk doing my stuff. I'm getting off at noon. And I'm talking to God. And I'm saying, well, I don't know why I saw that this morning, why you wanted me to, why all this happened, why is this happening, why do you want me to do a scrapbook store, I don't understand it. I get off work at lunchtime, go out to my car, I'm downtown in Santa Barbara, stop at a stoplight, go to the fire department, and a different voice in my car goes, you need to stop and ask about a business loan. Who are you? Why don't you identify yourselves? Who is it that's talking to me? Why are you telling me to do this? This has nothing to do with me. If you really want me to do this, you need to identify who you are, and you need to tell me more. I mean, how am I supposed to proceed on this? I don't even know what to do. But 1 block ahead is my bank. I'm at the stoplight, and literally, it's actually 1.5 blocks ahead. And I move forward, the light changes, and I think, ooh, if I don't do what they're asking me and it's God, maybe I'm doing something really bad. Okay, I'll pull in the bank, and I'll ask about a business loan. So I pull in, I park, I'm in my car, and I'm thinking, I don't want anybody to think I'm like talking to myself, so I'm in my head and I go, just because I'm going in there does not mean that I'm going to do a scrapbook store. My redheaded stubbornness. So I get out, walk in, I ask the teller, she says, I say, who did I talk to about business loan? She points to this Asian guy that's over in the desk, and I walk over and I go, hi, my name is Barbara Bartolome, I work for the Gewurz Graduate School of Education at UCSB. I'm interested in a business loan. Are you the right person? He says, yes, please sit down. He introduces himself and says, what do you want to use your business loan for? I'm really not ready to talk about that. So I say, well, I'm thinking of opening up a paper art store. Sounded more professional than scrapbook. So he looks at me and says, how much do you want to borrow? The absurdity of what I was doing struck me as funny in that moment, and I said, I don't know. How much do you think it's going to take to start a scrapbook store, a paper art store? And he just went, Mrs. Bartolome, you need to approach the bank when you have a business plan in hand. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I've wasted your time today. I'm so sorry. I'll come back when I have that. Thank you so much. And I'm starting to walk through the center of the bank. The voice from the car, the business-like voice goes, now wait a minute. You cannot give up that easily. You need to go back and ask someone else. I'm in my head going, you guys could make this a lot easier on me and show me who it is I'm supposed to talk to. This is not very fun. I feel embarrassed. Could you just help in some way? There's the exit door. That's where my car is. I'm going that way. If you see somebody I'm supposed to talk to, be sure to tell me who it is. I'm walking to the exit door. It's got glass cubicles. And then they've got a glass cubicle with a walkway, and then there's other glass cubicles going beyond, and then the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm walking right through the glass cubicle area, and there's a door to go outside. And I look at the first person and they're doing something in their glass cubicle and they don't look at me. And I look at the second person as I'm walking by, they don't look at me. And I look at the third person, they don't look at me. And the fourth person is this 32-year-old guy named Michael Serio. And I didn't know him from Adam. And he's writing something on his desk. And the second I look at him, he just jerks his head up and looks at me and smiles really big and goes, and I actually said, oh shit. That means I have to talk to this guy. I didn't want to do it. So I go to his door and I said, hi, my name is Bartolome, and I talked with the guy inside there about a business loan, and I realized I've jumped the gun and I've got an idea that I want to do, but I realize I need to create a business plan before I approach the bank, and I kind of jumped the gun today in my excitement, and I said, but what I really need to know is a business plan. Is that like a book that I need to buy? Is it a city college class that I need to take? Is it a software program? How do you know how to create, what is inside of a business plan? And he goes, do you have your accounts here? And I said, yeah. He said, would you like to sit down? I'll explain a little bit to you. And I said, sure. So I sat on his little bench thing, and he starts talking about cash flow predictions for your first year, 5-year build out, and blah, 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 blah. And he's telling me, and I'm intently listening, and he's looking at the computer because he's asked me for my ID. And so he then, after about 10 minutes of flowing information to me, he says, Mrs. Bartolome, could you wait for just a moment? I'll be right back. And I said, sure. And I'm thinking, aren't we done? You covered all that good stuff, and can I leave? And he's got my ID. So I'm sitting there, and he comes back. He only goes down like 2 cubicles, and he's talking to a lady, and they're looking at her computer, and maybe 4 minutes, and then he comes back and he goes, I stand up to meet him, and he goes, Mrs. Bartolome, you've been approved for a $250,000 loan to start your scrapbook store. 6 hours after I was told to do it. And I looked at him, I said, what? I said, but I thought I had to have a business plan. And he goes, well, now you will actually create your business plan knowing what your amount is that you have to spend on your store. So you'll be able to plan much better with that. So he said, would you and your husband like to come in tomorrow and sign paperwork for that? And I looked at him and I said, hang on just a second. Took my iPhone out. Victor, remember what I was talking to you about this morning in the closet of the scrapbook store? Well, I'm at the bank and they want to give me $250,000 to start that scrapbook store. You want to come in tomorrow and sign paperwork for that? Without missing a beat, that man said, sure, what time? We didn't discuss it that night. We never thought about how we were going to do it. We signed the papers the next day, and I built the store in 3 months. And 3 months later, in Santa Barbara, they named me Businesswoman of the Year. Wow. In front of 400 people, I had to give a thank you speech. The night before the thank you speech, I'd written it up without, of course, the epiphany story in it, because I was afraid to talk about that. I wasn't out of the closet with the NDE or anything. And I went to Victor, and I said, Victor, I'm really afraid to talk about what the truth is on how I got the store. I don't want people to think I'm crazy. So this is what I've got for my thank you speech. I don't really think I should really talk about, you will have a scrapbook store. He said, Barbara, I think that you're given these opportunities in your life because you are brave enough to talk about them. So I went and sat down in front of the computer and I wrote up that thank you with the whole epiphany story. And people still in Santa Barbara will see me walking down the street. I closed my store in 2009 when the big recession occurred because the university's economic forecast project came forth with information that brick and mortar stores are going to be heavily impacted by online sales. And Santa Barbara is a small town. And we really have lots of tourists, but are they coming to go to the scrapbook store? Yeah, there were a lot of women that did come to go to the scrapbook store, but it's not going to be the heavy thing that everybody else is going to come for. So I closed my store in 2009, and that fall was when I attended that IANDS, first IANDS conference, because Jeffrey Long asked me to go, and that's when my near-death experience started coming out into my life. So that store, I can literally look back and see transferring from being an executive assistant and being a director of, development at the university, helping the director of development and helping support and all these supportive roles I've been in, I needed to have that scrapbook store to build me to the point where I can talk in front of you with no qualms whatsoever. And that's what did it. Having that store, having my employees, having women coming in, talking, and there were so many times when we had this amazing moment in the store where my employees who knew how I'd gotten it, I told them, I hired women that were supportive of that idea. People would walk in the door and then they would go, oh my gosh, I can't believe the feeling that I just felt when I walked in the door of your store. And my girls would be over there at the front desk going, and then they'd go, how did you ever, you were the owner? How did you ever think of opening the store? Just the same thing I had said to that lady in Portland, Oregon. And I said, well, do you have a few minutes? I'll be happy to tell you. So I ended up telling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women my epiphany story. And then that helped me get strong enough to when my NDE unfolded for me when I got into the IANDS organization, for me to be able to talk about my NDE. So it was all built one thing or another, and we all go through a life that happens in, but recognize that even when it's negatives, that it's really something positive. You're building towards something bigger. So keep on doing the hard things, keep on doing the work in your life, keep on learning the things that you need to learn, keep on doing the nice things for other people. It's all point towards your whole soul growing while you're here. And that's it.
I just have one quick question.
Yeah, sure.
You had mentioned briefly, Victor, this is really a question for you,
Yeah.
but like if you were opening your mouth and talking, but it's this other voice, did you have an experience
Did you
with
know
that?
when I looked at you and was shocked in the closet when I saw the voice say, did you know that happened? You told me a million times.
When we recreated that, we realized that I had a blank look on my face. Barbara heard this, but it was directed for me, even though I don't remember that happening coming out of my mouth.
It wasn't his voice, and he didn't know that it had just happened.
So it wasn't like you were talking.
They
My
channeled.
mouth was not moving.
Wow.
Yeah, it was this voice from the living room that had happened, and it was this big, deep, slow-talking voice, which wasn't Victor at all.
Wow, okay.
It was interesting. I definitely knew the voice was the same from the living room
Right.
to when he talked to me. And he didn't even know it happened. I just looked, I went like this. He didn't know why I was doing that. Yeah.
Thank
I
you so
you
much
think
for
that you would walk away from me at that point. Like, this guy's stuck through everything. Hi.
I want to ask two questions. First, astral projection, is that a form of out-of-body experience also?
I don't know what astral projection is because a lot of people are nodding. I don't really know because I don't know what astral projection is. I mean, I've heard of it, but I haven't investigated it. So I can't answer that question because I'm not a person who knows. So you'll have to get somebody here who knows about astral projection to get that answer.
I wanted to ask, were you aware of any of your past lives or the relationships of the people in your life today from the past?
Oh, so that's a very cool question. That brings up another aspect. Okay, so when so how I got this, moving forward with the IANDS group was that in that, after that conference, I ended up telling someone that was a close friend of mine in Santa Barbara who's pretty well known and pretty, she's just been around Santa Barbara forever. About my near-death experience, and I didn't know that she worked part-time supporting the newspaper in Santa Barbara. So when I told her about my near-death experience, she said, oh my God, we've got to do an article about that. And I was like, well, I just won Businesswoman of the Year. I do not want to do an article about my near-death experience. And she ended up sending an interviewer over to me, a reporter, and he ended up talking to me about my whole near-death experience and took pictures and stuff. And they were going to put it in the Sunday newspaper. I was really reluctant. Even though I kind of started to open up towards it, I wasn't really ready to jump out of the closet yet. And at the end of the conversation with him, he said, why are we doing this? Why are we writing about your near-death experience? And I said, I actually don't know, but when are you going to print this? And he said, in 2 weeks, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. And I said, okay, let me get back to you on that. So that's when I called the IANDS organization and said, how hard is it to start an IANDS group? And they told me all the details that I needed to know, and I called them back and said, could you put something in your article that there's going to be a meeting for IANDS, which is a near-death experience organization that's worldwide, and I'm going to have this meeting on such and such date, such and such time, such and such place. So he put that in the article. 5 people called me, and one was a medical doctor in Santa Barbara. He's still on my board of directors. 2 of them were marriage family therapists. One had not only a near-death experience, but a shared death experience because he worked for the Zen Project in San Francisco back in the 70s, I think it was, and or 80s. And he actually runs now the Shared Crossing Project, which is shared death experiences information. His name is William Peters. And then there was a woman who had a PhD in consciousness studies, and one other person I can't even think of. So as the, and the last person was the most important one, was Peter Wright, who does past life regression therapy and is trained by the Monroe Institute and has 30 years of history with the Monroe Institute, and he does psychotherapy in Santa Barbara. He is also a development person in Santa Barbara working for the Red Cross and the Alzheimer's Association. Very well-known guy in Santa Barbara. So they all came forward and said, we want to help. I didn't know how to stage I didn't have anybody to help me tell me how to actually do my meetings, like Diane. If I only known Diane, I would have been very helped by her as being my mentor. But I just allowed them each to stand up and give like a 2-minute review of who they were. So I would say, my name is Barbara Bartolome, and I have a little board of directors here, and these are the, and I let them each say something. Well, when the past life regression therapist, Peter, would talk, he would say, I do past life regression therapy and life between lives, and I do hypnotherapy, and well, I never experienced anything like that. I never even knew what past life regression was. I didn't even know what it was. And so probably my face probably reflected that, because about the 3rd meeting, he came into me and called me and said, Barbara, so I get the feeling you don't know what past life regression is. And I said, you're right, I have absolutely no idea. And he said, okay, so I would like to show you what that is. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure I really want to do this. I don't know what this is. And he goes, can you want to come over on Saturday? And so I didn't want to say no because he was helping me with the organization, and I felt like I needed everybody that I could get to help. So I went over on Saturday, and he said, I'm going to hypnotize you, and you may end up seeing yourself in like a movie, and you'll still be able to hear me, but you'll be able to see what's happening as this movie unfolds. And it'll be, very impacting, and you might cry, or you might feel emotions. And so he was explaining, and when he said, we're ready to start, and I said, yes, I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do this. And so I was sitting in the chair, and he starts, I'm counting backwards from 10, and you're going to get more and more relaxed. And now we're going down some stairs. You're at the top stair. When you get to the bottom stair, you're going to be even more relaxed. And so he's doing all this stuff. I guess I hypnotized easily. I started seeing that I was hiding in some very underbrushy, bushy type of bushes, and I was a child, and I was terrified. And what I could see outside of those bushes beyond were huts in Africa, African type of huts, and dirt, and I was afraid that the people who had come into the village, who had been hatcheting and clubbing the villagers who had all run, I'd been separated from my parents, would find me. There was a dead person in the dirt beyond the bushes that I was hiding in, and he was face down in the dirt with blood flowing into the dirt. And I was frightened beyond all, and I started whimpering, and I was seeing all this, and I was talking to him, and I was seeing it all. And as it unfolded, the bad guys, the slave traders, they found me in those bushes. And they put me into a box that had these slats of wood that were like that wide, and they would cross, across and down. And there were little holes in between where the slats met, and I was able to peek out of those holes, and I was able to see the dead man who was still face down in the dirt. obviously it'd been hours and hours since he'd been killed. And I was very, very afraid, and I had, urinated in the box and thrown up because of the smell, and I was very upset and wanting my parents and very upset. Then he moved me forward, so he was moving me forward each time, and he moved me forward to the next time I ate. And I was on a big ship, and I was in the hold, and it was just wooden floor, and there were 100 people laying in states of distress all over this floor, seasick, throwing up. There was a big barrel over in each corner, and that was where you peed and pooped. And it was so visual, it was so real, it was so, oh my gosh, I was, not with my parents. I didn't know what had happened to my parents. There were people from my village. There were only about 5 or 6 young children like my age, but most of them were, I would say, 14 to 28 years old. They were grabbing the young men who they were going to get the most money for. So then they moved me forward again, and I was actually on a plantation, and some lady named Annie was trying to show me how to peel potatoes, because that was what was my job, was going to be supporting this lady who did all the cooking for the plantation, all the slaves and the white people too. And I didn't even know what this tool was that she was talking to me about, and I didn't understand her language. And she ended up throwing the tool into the dirt. I was sitting on a 3-legged chair with a bunch of potatoes in a big bin next to me, and I started crying. Then moved me forward. I was about 12 years old. I understood more of the language that they were speaking to me, and I had acclimated. And Annie had put me in charge of the chickens, and I was very proud of the fact that I got to choose which chicken got killed for dinner, and I collected the eggs, and I took care of the chickens. Annie's husband was named Joe, and he was very kind and loving, but Annie was very structured and direct and no patience. And so I actually loved Joe very much, but I was afraid of Annie. Then the last time that I was in that life was I was 16 years old. I was actually dressed in a cotton dress, which was different than my earlier years, so I was almost like the family had kind of like adopted me in a way, because I was the nanny to their 3 children. We had about a 7-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old daughter, and a 4-year-old son. And this man named the professor would ride his horse to the plantation once a week and teach the 3 children, and I was actually in the room with the children when I saw myself, and he was actually helping me to learn what they learned, because I was expected to help them with their studies in the week that he was gone, to help them until the next week when he came back again. So I had some pride in myself, and I was learning to read and write. That was the end of that life that I saw, but it so completely resonated with me, because in my entire life, I've been the one when there was just an elementary school full of white kids, and somebody came who was colored, was Hispanic, who was anything, and was different. I was the one who immediately walked up and said, "I'll be your friend," and had that love for that person. And I've literally had that all since I was young. My mom, because of her police officer stuff, was pretty prejudiced. My grandmother was very prejudiced too. So I broke that in what my life had happened in that previous life. I see how that contributed to me understanding that loving people, no matter what their outside appearance was. It's also led me a lot of times in my life to trust people that I shouldn't trust. So I've had to learn to find a parameter and not let people get in too deeply, because otherwise some people will use that, and it's not a good thing. So it's all been a growth thing, but it's amazing when you find that you've had a previous life. I think it's the most amazing thing in the world. It's so resonating with me. He took me into the Bardo, which is the life between lives, and he said, "Do you recognize any of the people in this life in your current life?" So I immediately knew who both Annie and Joe were. And Joe was that day that I left my husband, that previous husband, and it was 3 years after the MDE. The day that I left him, I went to an apartment complex in Santa Barbara, and I had looked at 4 other complexes that day, and I had been very honest and told the people who were doing the renting that I had 2 children and I was leaving an abusive husband, and that I couldn't pay the $800 security deposit and the $800 a month rent right now because my husband had controlled all the money and my salary went right into his hands. And so I'd only been able to save $800. So I said, if you allow me to, I will pay $50 per month until I get the $800 security deposit paid off. And 4 people said no. The 5th person looked at me and said, yes, you can move in. And I burst into tears. It was the last one of the day, and I was needing to go pick up my kids, and I was like, and my husband had gone off to, his Montreal, Quebec, Canada trip and was going to be gone in a week, and I had to be out, moved, and in my new place and have a, restraining order already filed against him so he couldn't come and kill me. And so, that's what I thought would protect me. Anyway, so when I said, why are you doing this? Why do you trust me? And I was crying. He said, I grew up in the Netherlands during World War II, and he said, my parents had people knock on their door that were running from the Germans. They were Jewish. He said, my parents always helped each group that came with maybe a place to stay overnight, or a meal, or an extra coat that we had, or a blanket. He said, today, I'm honoring my parents, and I'm helping you. Well, he became a very, very good friend of mine, wonderful, he and his wife, and if I had not moved into that apartment, my son would have never met his daughter, and I would have never been connected to Victor. I would have lived someplace else in town and never met him. So you never know when it's something that's going to be happening to you that you can't tell what that's going to be. Now, the big thing was the person who lived upstairs in that apartment complex was an elderly man from Latvia. He was in his 80s, his wife was in her 80s, she was a little older than him, so she was like maybe about 87, he was probably about 84, and they'd been married 69 years by that time. And she was German, he was Jewish, they married in Casablanca during World War II. They immigrated from Europe, where he worked for Air France, over to Canada, then he moved to the East Coast, worked for airlines, then he moved to Santa Barbara, was a travel agent, and then he retired, and they were in this apartment. I could hear them after I moved in. They would bicker a lot. She'd say, Oscar, and he'd say, Marie, and we could hear them. So what I decided to do was make a difference in their lives. So that little 3-year-old daughter and that little son who was 11 when I first moved in, I said to them, okay, you guys, we got a project. I want you guys to draw a picture, and Scott, you can help Julie with that. And then, Scotty, I want you to go out and find a flower in the neighborhood, and we're going to put that picture and the flower on their doorstep. They're not going to know it's us. So we did that for 3 weeks or something, 3 or 4 times a week. They get this picture from these kids with this flower on their doorstep. Well, finally, I saw Oscar, and he said, is it you putting the flower in the picture? And he said, yes. And he said, would you guys like to come up for cookies? So I thought, sure. So we went upstairs, had cookies. Kids sat on the floor with colored crayons. I know how to entertain kids so that they won't interrupt and stuff. And so I got to hear their stories, and we went up again and again. And then when it was Hanukkah, I celebrated Hanukkah with them. When it was Christmas, I baked the turkey and took the Christmas dinner up to them. And they ended up, down the line, a few months, 6 months or so, they started calling me their daughter. They'd never had a child. So when I had to go to the grocery store, hey, Mom and Dad, do you guys need anything at the grocery store? Oh, Dad, you have to go to a doctor's appointment? Do you want me to drive you? Dad, this was really beautiful. I needed them as much as they needed me. My parents were dead. I had no support system. I had that angry ex-husband out in Galena, which is 10 miles away. I needed somebody. They needed somebody. We loved each other. So about 2 years later, when I met Victor, he actually, Dad, did not want Victor in my life because thought I was going to escape out of their life into his life and be gone. So he wouldn't talk to Victor the first time I took Victor over to introduce. But then, oh my God, they both loved Victor. So on Sundays, we would take meals over to them and fix their dinner. And then Marie had a stroke and she died. So then we just had Oscar. So Oscar was alone in the apartment, and we decided, I had already married Victor by the time Oscar came to the wedding, and we decided he would move into a complex for elderly senior citizens. So we moved him over there, and he was happily there for 10 years. Every Sunday we had dinner with him. He called me all the time. He was godfather to our little baby that was born. All of our kids loved him. But all those times, all those years, we thought, he doesn't really have like anything. His apartment, had junky furniture, looked like it was from the garage sale. He never bought anything. So I thought he had no money. So when Christmas would come, we knew he loved cashmere sweaters. So we would splurge and buy, $100 cashmere sweater for Oscar. So the day comes that he dies, and about 4 years prior to that, he had asked me in one of our quiet moments if I would be the executor for his estate. And I thought, estate? Okay, but I don't know how to do that, Dad. And he said, you don't have to do anything. I have an attorney that'll take care of everything. You just have to make sure the attorney does what I dictate needs to be done. And I said, oh, can Victor help me? Yes. Okay, good. So 4 years pass, he passes away. It's a heart attack. He's gone fast. I had just talked to him 2 hours earlier. We went over, we loved him, his body, and kissed him goodbye. And it was very sad for us. And so then we had to clean out his apartment, which was even sadder for me to have to touch all of his things. And we kept all the photographs of him. He really didn't have a family. He had grown up in Latvia. His family had been killed by the Germans. His brother, his mother, and his father. So Marie had, distant relatives in Germany, but, not really that close. So the attorney calls us and tells us we have to go into his office, and we're in there, and of course I'm still not over. I'm still upset. I loved him very much, and Victor did too. And so we're sitting there, and he says, I have to read the will to you. So he starts reading. He says, I, Oscar Seba, leave, sound mind and body, leave $100,000 to the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles. And I'm like, oh, what? What? I'm like, I didn't say anything, but I was like shocked. And Victor was too, I could tell by his face, like, he didn't know he had $100,000. Then I leave $100,000 to visit El Monte, where he lived, where we moved him to. Oh my gosh, this is so crazy. We had no idea any money. And then I leave $250,000 to my daughter, Barbara. Well, I burst into tears, looked at the guy and said, no, I will not be paid for having loved them. No, 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 no. And the guy has this really sort of sick-looking smirk on his face. And he pushes this folded piece of paper across the desk to me, and he goes, your father knew you quite well. And in the scratchy handwriting of my little adopted dad, it says, my dearest Barbara, I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but Marie and I want to make a difference in your life. This is not payment for having loved us. This is a gift for you and Victor and the children. Please know that we loved you. And then, Dad. So, what am I going to do? So the attorney looks at me and says, well, it's my obligation to give you that $250,000. If you don't want it, you can turn around and give it back to me. Jeez. So I paid the $200,000 down on our mortgage, and I put $10,000 in the bank for each one of the kids' college from Grandpa. And then 5 years later, when I walked into that bank, and I was sitting there asking about that business loan, that's what he saw on the computer when he asked me if I had my account there. So Dad's gift to me was really my scrapbook store. He was part of the whole story that unfolded that got me right here today. And if you don't give out and be kind to people, they can't be kind to you back again. So remember that. Don't expect it. I never knew that he had that money. We had no clue he had that possibility. But the other side knows who to connect. And so if you're open to that and you are kind to people and you go out there and do things, don't expect anything to come back to you. But when it does, it's meant to be there. And it's meant to change your life, and it's meant to put you on a track that maybe wouldn't have been available to you had you not loved and cared about that person. So go out there, do good things, guys. Understand those beautiful beings are there. I don't care what you call them, they don't care either. But understand they're there and they want to help. They want to be in your life. They want you to have communication with them. So open yourself up and have an incredible life.